Hey everyone, it's Chad,
It's Khalil.
and we are the Marshals of Truth. Alright, so to start off this episode, we'd like to, of course, just recap what we talked about in the last one. In our last episode, we detailed China as a society in which it valued peace, in a greater emphasis than it did freedom. We detailed some of the things such as its idea of social harmony, um, the ideas in which how the party will be in some ways above the law, and where the law and as well as the truth can be a little more flexible. We also looked at how personal freedoms are existent in the society of the People's Republic of China, but still to a limited extent, of course, in respect to the United States. And one of the things that we mentioned in that last episode was the idea of the social credit system, and it was one we kind of touched on, but when we recorded it, we felt like we wanted to give a lot more information on that, and then also continue on in greater detail on how civil rights, religious rights, and other things to that sort are a lot less valued in Chinese society to the United States, which we'll get to either at the end of this episode or in the next one. So I'll hand it off to you.
Business Insider, they recently, within the past year or two, did a report on the social credit score system in China, titled China's Social Credit System, Punishments and Rewards Explained. Um, of course, we'll have the link in the description if just in case you guys want to look and verify our findings. Um, but basically, the social credit system, as it was first announced about 8 years ago, is an important component of the socialist market economy system in the social governance system, and aims to reinforce the idea that keeping trust is glorious and breaking trust is disgraceful in Chinese society under the CCP. Now, currently, the social credit system is not nationwide. It's adopted in certain provinces within the country. Most likely, it's more or less adopted in the big cities like Shanghai and Beijing, and not so much in other provinces. Like like well, it's not universal within the country is what I'm saying. And the idea is that it will be eventually. Interesting thing about the places that do currently have it, though, is that the social credit system is like ranked, and this ranking is decided by the People's Bank of China, their own central bank, and the state economic planning team and the state court system. So it kind of gives you an idea of what they'll punish you with for a low score. If the bank is involved and the economic planning team and the state court system is involved, you might imagine the consequences of a low score. They might hit you financially, and that's actually very much the case. Um, there is a currently an example on how Jack Ma's Ant Group, his corporate group called the Ant Group, and leading over certain big businesses in China. He's currently practicing with the idea of the social credit scores in his businesses, in a certain private fashion, saying that quote uses its own unofficial scoring system for its employees, such as studying shopping habits according to the think tank Merix, end quote. And that's according to Business Insider. So Jack Ma's Ant Group, and the businesses that are under that wider corporate giant, they have their employees tracking their shopping habits and their in the and what they purchase over the course of their day, and they introduce certain social credit scores based off of the things that they buy or things that they commonly buy. Um, so, additionally, quote, like private credit scores, a person's social score can move up and down depending on their behavior. The exact methodology is a secret, but examples of infractions including bad driving, smoking in non-smoking zones, buying too many video games, and posting fake news online, fake news, um, especially about terrorist attacks or of airport security. Other potential punishable offenses include um, spending too much time playing video games and wasting money on frivolous purchases and posting on social media. So I'm sure, Chad, you got something you might want to say about that. But if the government is looking at every expense that you have stored during over the course of your day, they're checking all the things that you spend money on, whether it be video games or using social media, then that's honestly quite scary, and it feels very 1984, and then they would have an impact on like well, I'll explain what some of the punishments can be for having a low credit score, but these are the sort of things that they check. And it's scary to know that a government is checking on you like that.
Yeah, and all of this is made possible through China's very, very extensive surveillance state. These include, security cameras, facial recognition, biometrics, and systems of that sort in which they're able to monitor all these sort of interconnected behaviors, and they can therefore punish you for them. And once again, you see this whole idea of a social credit system is in huge contrast to financial freedom, and that this is an idea that like we have in the United States and other Western societies in which you could buy, sell, do these kind of decisions as you want, and you really won't be punished for them to the same extent as we will end up describing, but you don't have these other behaviors, at least being monitored. You could buy and spend as much on frivolous things, play as much video games as you want. That's not going to be tracked by a central government seeking to kind of change your behaviors, because at the end of the day, that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to change these behaviors by penalizing them um, and kind of clamping down on the personal freedoms that an individual would have in the society in order, once again, as we said, to get more people along with the main message, with the main values of the Chinese Communist Party.
And the extent that the Chinese Communist Party will go to forcing the social credit system is quite insane, quite um, amoral, often as it can be seen, with these examples, these following examples, like restricting travel, by barring individuals from flights. You know, I believe, according to Business Insider, from 2019, over the course of the year of 2019, they denied 17.5 million flight reservations, according to China's National Public Credit Information Center. And people are barred from getting business class train tickets, if they have a low social credit score, and kept out of the best hotels. Internet speeds often can slow down significantly, to the point in where it may seem pointless to even use a mobile device or even any sort of technology. And even their credit cards can be canceled. In one instance, 17 children who refused military service were barred from enrolling in higher education, applying for high school, or even continuing studies in school. So there was even a case in which a student lost his position and after being accepted to a local university, a local prestigious university in one of the big cities in China, because his father was unable to repay a loan. And so this isn't just individual. This can often like follow down into the next generation because if your father, you know, may not be useful to the state in the sense that it's like one cog in the machine and you didn't repay that loan. And so you might be hurting the national economy just that tiny, tiny, tiny bit, then maybe your son, might be as much of a danger to the state. And that's really just the way in how the Chinese Communist Party operates, and how the PRC currently operates under CCP leadership, in where every small difference or separation from the norm um, in um, in this socialist society is seen as an existential threat to the state, even when a man like isn't financially able to repay their loan. Their son, his son, who may not who may be um like applying or hoping to get further enough in his education at university to help his financially struggling father, loses his position because of this. And it's quite amoral. And we'll look into more examples, like, oh, yeah, public announcements on public transportation, in over loudspeakers in busy city centers, they often warn explicitly not to disbehave against the government, or else their behavior will be recorded in the individual credit information system. And so, you know, by behavior, you know, um, they're talking about maybe maybe you look towards the direction of a camera and you give it the middle finger, because in such of these in these like big cities in China like Beijing and Shanghai, they are so heavily policed and surveillanced by cameras that are constantly looking at you, and like they actually can find your your entire record, of like social credit systems just by looking at your face, if you're walking without a mask in a city. And so what they mean when they say behavior will be recorded in the individual credit information system, they mean that they can see everything you do. Like they can track you as an individual amongst 1.4 billion people and say, oh, you didn't tie your shoes, or you walked outside of the lines when crossing the street. And it's very scary.
Yeah, all of this is an egregious violation of a right to privacy in which many individuals feel that we have, especially in the Western world. Um, a government that can monitor your every sort of behavior and then punish you for that, for even just things, like I said, of just like spending decisions. Those are personal things. What you buy is yours. And now you have a government that can monitor that, that could penalize you for that. As I said, it's an egregious violation of an individual freedom to basically do and use your money as you want. In the United States, we talked about the social credit system. In the United States, we have just you have a different credit system that's more just financial. Keep track how many times you'll go into debt or you'll overspend versus how much you make money, and that'll just usually just help. Um, it would change, your eligibility for like getting a loan or like how much someone would want to sell you their car based on your like financial decisions. But that's it. It's your financial decisions. And it usually just depends on how much are you just overspending. And that's a different thing than just what you're spending things on or how you're spending your time or how much you post on social media or if you drive too fast. Like it's expanding it way, way beyond anything that really needs to be done. And it's just, as I said, it's just a violation of people's freedoms to do and act as they please because these behaviors are not any sort of terroristic behavior. It's not any sort of inflammatory, extremely political, separationist behaviors. These are. They're not. They're just things that could they're really just decisions and behaviors that the state seeks to change in order to create a society that it views as much more peaceful and much more stable than one in which the people can do and act as they please.
Yeah, the CCP, they put a whole nother different meaning to every act as a political act because they watch everything you do. Not just physically, but let's say like on your phone. If you type something that says like I don't even think you can type because of the Great Firewall of China, and you thought the physical wall was the only wall of China, and they have the Great Firewall of China as well. Like if you so much as type Xi Jinping in a search bar, and you don't even have to press enter. The government can see like your screen if it so wanted to look at you. If you had a low score and that you were deemed as suspicious to the state and like existential threat to the state, then like if you so much as typed the leader's name, then they're assuming that you're going to like look up ways and trying to kill him, or look up ways and like look up like false information about him, about how he doesn't care about human rights, and about how he doesn't care about every one of his citizens. So um, it's a very much a surveillance state, and it can be equated a lot of times to places that um, have been known for their surveillance in the West, like Nazi Germany, is a great example. It's always a great example with these extremes, but then also like modern day societies like Russia, looking at everything you do. Um, the fact that in the early um, um, protests against the war, in February and March back in Russia and the big cities, people would so much as put a sign that was like with white, and it didn't even need to say anything on that. You would get carted away by two or three different police officers, thrown into a van, and sent over to a Russian prison somewhere, like the modern equivalent of a gulag. Um, but yeah, I mean, apparently, though, those that fall within the party vision can expect discounts on energy bills, rent without deposit, better interest at banks, and more. So many within the country embrace the new system. An example of this is an unidentified 32-year-old Chinese entrepreneur who described the effect of the new policy, saying in an interview um, by The Guardian, but the Business Insider reported on it, saying, quote, I feel like in the past 6 months since in his province, the social credit system has been enacted, people's behavior has gotten better and better. For example, when we drive, now we always stop in front of crosswalks. If you don't stop, you will lose your points. At first, we just worried about losing points, but now we just got used to it. End quote. So ideally, like there are certain annoyances, there are certain like issues that we have with people over a regular day, whether it be like catcalling, in like regular day, like city life, or traffic accidents, or people, crossing the street, without a crosswalk and then getting in danger of getting ran over, or theft, like mild theft even, like stealing a gum pack that's only $2. In China, that's a big, big thing, you know, and you would think you would want to be rid of those certain social deficiencies of people, that would lead to disorder. Like, oh, it'd be so much better if none of that happened. But when you actually have a government that makes sure that it doesn't happen, you end up living in a very different society than you probably expected. And that's why, according to many different people that were interviewed by the Business Insider for this report, that again we'll have in the description. They said, quote, China's social credit system incorporates a moral edge into the program, which is why they have compared it, which is why many have compared it to some level of dystopian governance, such as George Orwell's 1984, in which the state heavily controls every aspect of a citizen's life. But despite that, Human Rights Watch called the system chilling, including a futuristic vision of Big Brother out of control. Some citizens say it is making them better people already, end quote. So, you hear like an interesting point of view is that people living outside of China see it as 1984, George Orwell, Human Rights Watch called the system chilling, but some citizens say that it's making them better people already. And that 32-year-old Chinese entrepreneur, unidentified Chinese entrepreneur that was interviewed by The Guardian and reported by Business Insider, they only have good things to say about it. But there are multiple reasons for this. Like you would not have a Chinese citizen um, being interviewed in China speaking against the Chinese government. Again, because of the surveillance we already mentioned. You really think the Chinese government would let one of their citizens say these terrible things about the government? So when Chinese citizens, because of their really like hands-on government, it's really hard to see if their views that go to like support the party is actually legitimate. It's really hard to tell, but then again, maybe this view of whether or not like the Chinese government can be seen as totalitarian or surveillance based. Maybe it's just a cultural thing. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. You know, maybe because so many people in the West are critiquing it, and all the people that we're hearing in China, not so much so. Maybe it is a cultural thing, and that's really the question with a lot of these, especially China, because it's like so far away from what we call Western society and what we and like they're built on different principles, like way far separated from like Western political philosophy, that it's hard to compare them in the same way. But can we call China's government totalitarian and surveillance based, or is it just trying to bring about peace and the people are completely fine with it?
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting question. Um, because like we said, we'd have to compare the cultures of the people who are living in these, China and compare it to, the people living in the United States. The United States was founded upon the ideas of freedom, the rejection of a large central government, and basically any ways that people and religions and other things could be independent from any sort of authority was why we were founded. China is it's a much more different system. As we've described, the whole emphasis again is on peace, is on security, is on stability. That's what's more important. It's not important that, you don't have the ability to go buy, say, some things that you may want or you don't. You don't have to, I guess, in that society, it may not be as important to be practicing what religion you feel you should be practicing, or to make what financial decisions you feel like you do, as long as those decisions are, watched after by a greater state government. And so, yeah, you really have to compare, is it right to be calling them a totalitarian state, or is that just our perspective as a Westerner because we value the ideas of individual freedom, representative government, all of those kind of things? Since we value those to our core, of course it is to us to be seen as authoritarian, but it is interesting. We see in these quotes from the people living there in the state, it is it is somewhat beneficial to the people who go along with the system, and to them it's making their country a better place. And so, yeah, it is an interesting question having to contrast those two because it seems easy to do so, just from an objective point of view. But if you were to kind of take the perspectives of the people there, yeah, it makes it a lot more muddy. Um, but yeah, continuing on that point, there still are some aspects in which there are more repressions again of individual freedom that we in the West, of course, like to point out because we value those ideas a little more. Um, some of those examples are, yeah, as you could see here, the demolishing of a church after a 7 year standoff with different religious authorities. And then we have other ones in which different mosques and churches and other religious facilities are sometimes renovated, are destroyed, or sold to to private vendors and just changed into different things. It's a repression once again of the freedom to exercise your religion, or basically to practice what you believe in. And that's something again we in the West value deeply. In the United States, again, it's enshrined in our Constitution in the First Amendment, in which Congress cannot pass laws to discriminate against religion or to establish a state religion. Here in China, once again, that value is just not as important, especially to the central government. It's, of course, a lot different on the ground, and if you were to ask people of the Uyghur denomination, they would definitely have a different point of view than, say, a party member in Shanghai. But yeah, once again, you have on the state level a just complete disregard for the ideas that we have in the West of religious freedom. All again in the vein of creating a state that's more peaceful, a state that is free of ideas that could promote, separatism or just divergence from a national culture, um, like divergence from a national culture, which again is in a huge contrast to what we have in the United States.
Right, and that's why you see these examples of anti-religious actions. You see here, they demolished a church. And this is not the only one. They do this all over the country. This is just one that Fox News chose to report. Um, and then, mosques all around the country, as well as Buddhist temples also all around the country, and mostly near its like western and southern regions, but also again anywhere they're around. And I wasn't, I forgot to actually. get a screenshot of an article of a synagogue being torn down, but there are um, there are examples of that as well. There's even a group, called the Kaifeng Jews. Um, the I believe it's the only native Chinese group of Jewish people in the country. I think that's what it was described as in the article that I read. Um, but again, I'd have to I'd have to show it again, maybe in the description, maybe have a link over there. But they're going after not discriminating, in their persecution against religion. All the big religions, whether it be Buddhism, um, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. So it actually is quite universal in their hatred against religion. Um, but then there's also a quick thing I wanted to mention, Operation Fox Hunt. People probably haven't heard about this, but I quickly mentioned in the last episode how the CCP likes to persecute Chinese nationals that leave the country for whatever reason, and then, somehow get the attention of some newspaper, or become somewhat of a public voice speaking against the party, just being outside of the country. And Operation Fox Hunt is when government agents of the party, go to those nations and where they're speaking against, where they're speaking against the CCP, even if it's thousands of miles away. It could be 10,000 miles away, and they'll still come for you, and maybe they won't kill you, maybe they won't, although I bet there have been examples of that. But they will remind you, for example, will send an email or a call or knock on your door physically at the house you may be living in, or wherever home you are taking residence in, and to remind you of the fact that your family still lives in China and the government can do whatever they want with them.
Yep, exactly. Once again, it's just another example of just the disregard for personal freedoms, all again in the sense of creating a more peaceful, a more secure, more stable society. And as we again, we this is kind of the point of what we're trying to describe here when we talk about China is in the society that we have here, the idea of peace is valued much, much more to a greater extent than the idea of freedom. Um, Again, these ideas can seem very contrasting, and so we have different governments experimenting with, well, not really experimenting, but practicing one a lot more than the other. And in China, once again, peace is the greatest idea, is the greatest, is the most important idea that is. And so everything that can be done to ensure that peace is all fine and dandy. All right, so basically what we have there again is just a society that is doing anything and everything that it can to ensure that what you have in the country is a peaceful, stable, and non-divisive society. And once again, that's just a great example of a civilization that values peace and a greater impact than freedom. And so that's basically as much as we want to talk about in this episode. In our next one, we're going to be talking about the United States as an example of a place that values freedom to a much, much, much greater extent than it does peace. And we'll kind of detail that. Um, and then, as well as some of the philosophers who have influenced that idea, so that we can kind of continue along with this, um, with the debate really between peace, freedom, and then how we get to a balance between that. So, with that, we are the Marshals of Truth. We'll see you in the next episode.